All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started here. We do have a lot of information to go through, and hopefully this is going to be a good use of your time. We're hoping to provide you with a lot of information all about short-term rentals and the rules and regulations in Steamboat Springs. I'm Kristi Doran. I'm the staff attorney with the city. I've been with the city for approximately 7 years now, and one of my primary obligations or responsibilities with the city is to represent the city in litigation, including liquor code violations, short-term rental violations, or any offense that is cited into our municipal court. And this is Paula Ross.
Yep. Paula Ross, I'm the short-term rental technician, so basically my job is to process all the short-term rental licenses. I also support the compliance officer and Kristi when it comes to different issues with STRs, work through the hearings process, things like that. I've been with the city about 3 years. I started actually as the short-term rental technician as soon as licenses had to be, the license code rather went into effect and licenses had to be issued. So, but I've lived in Steamboat for about 36 years. I know most of you in this room. You know, you probably heard me talk to you at different times about mill levy overrides and bond issues for the school board way back in the day. So I'm really happy to be here today and work with Kristi and help you guys understand everything there is to know about STRs.
And we are recording this presentation that will ultimately be posted online, so we would ask that you silence your cell phones. Obviously, if you have to take a phone call, you're welcome to step out and take those calls. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. We do have a bit of a disclaimer up front.
Any chance you can speak a little louder?
We can certainly try. Is that better? Okay. And please, at any time, let us know if you are having trouble hearing us in the back. So we are providing this presentation for informational purposes only. Our goal is to help you understand more about the rules and regulations and provide you with resources to help educate yourself with regard to what are the rules and regulations surrounding short-term rentals in Steamboat Springs. And my goal is that you can prevent either yourself or your clients from ever having to appear in front of the short-term rental hearings officer or in front of the municipal court judge. So should you or any of your clients need legal advice, we would ask that you please consult with your own attorney. So a brief agenda of everything that we will review in this presentation. I would ask that we hold questions until the end. We are trying to reserve some time to allow for questions, but we're hoping we answer a lot of your questions as we go through this presentation. So we're first going to provide a brief overview of short-term rentals. Then Paula will go through licensing renewal requirements. I will discuss the prohibition of transferring licenses and the few exceptions that are allowed in the code. And then we'll get into operating without a license, along with operational requirements, what those violations look like, and the possible consequences. Paula will then again talk about the website and all of the information that is available on the website, and then a checklist for what to do before you call.
All right.
So in 2022, after great debate and probably 18 months or more, City Council adopted the overlay zone and the short-term rental code, which has been modified a few times and tweaked over the last few years. But the overlay zone provides different types of zoning for where short-term rentals are allowed, and then different restrictions. So it's a tricolor map, red, yellow, and green. Zone A is the unrestricted area, that is the green area. Zone B, the restricted area, is the yellow area on the map. And then Zone C is the generally prohibited area, the red area on the map. So there are some exceptions, but it's a little bit more complicated than just yes, maybe, and no. And then the licensing code that was adopted in 2022 basically requires a short-term rental license for any short-term rental within Steamboat Springs, and we'll define that for you, I believe, on the next slide, and provides operational requirements, possible violations, and potential consequences for non-compliance unless you are granted an exemption. So there are a few properties that have qualified for the exemption. And those particular properties are not required to have a short-term rental license, but they are allowed to operate short-term rentals. So I believe that includes the Grand, one Steamboat Place, and
Sorry.
what's the third one?
The Sheraton.
The Sheraton.
They have a
So-
number of properties there that also qualify under that.
So if you have a unit in one of those properties, short-term rentals, a license is not required. You are allowed to operate on a short-term rental basis. So short-term rental defined.
Sorry, I'm going to jump in.
No, go ahead.
The Sheraton is a little different because there are properties at the Sheraton that the Sheraton owns that fall within that exemption. There are also individual townhomes at the Sheraton that do require specific licenses. So, you guys as realtors may understand which ones those are. If you don't, I have that list, and so you can always give me a call to find out specifically. That's the property of the three that's just a little wonky because it has the exemption, but also the individual requirement.
All right, so short-term rental, there are a few things. One, it's always going to be for a period of less than 30 consecutive days. You are renting to guests. It's a lodging accommodation, and you're receiving something in return. Money, maybe you're doing a house exchange. You're getting some kind of consideration for them staying at this property. And then there are three different types of short-term rentals. So a general short-term rental is renting the entire dwelling unit. So a dwelling unit is defined separately, but it's essentially a building or part of a building that is intended for the use of one family. So it includes a sitting area, a kitchen area, sleeping areas, bedrooms, and sanitary, so bathroom facilities. So things that fall into this category: condominiums, townhomes, single-family homes, half of a duplex, things like that. Those are dwelling units. So a short-term rental is renting out that entire unit to guests while you are not residing in the premises at all. Then there are two other types of short-term rentals under the code. A hosted short-term rental is where you are residing in your primary residence and you are renting out one bedroom within your residence while you are present when the rental is occurring. And then there's a temporary short-term rental. So that also requires that this be your primary residence and that you are renting to someone else. You're renting the entire unit while you are away. So this is a great example of, hey, I am going to be on vacation. I'm going to try and make a little bit of money for the week while I'm on vacation to help supplement my own vacation. So all three of those types of short-term rentals have different requirements and regulations as far as where they're allowed, but they also all require a short-term rental license before you advertise or operate that short-term rental unit.
So, with all short-term rentals, it is unlawful to advertise, that's really important, offer, provide, or operate the rental in the city of Steamboat Springs without first obtaining a license. So a lot of questions that we get as far as people in Routt County will call, hey, we want to do short-term rentals. I always tell them to go back to the county, but just, you guys probably already know this, short-term rentals are strictly prohibited in the county. There are one or two small exceptions. But our STR laws only regulate the city of Steamboat Springs. And everybody has to have one. Again, this is the most important thing. STR licenses, you have to have it before you even begin advertising. I get a lot of questions about, oh, I'm gonna buy this property. I wanna make sure everything is set and I'm ready to go, day one, or I can start advertising before I own the home. No, you can't. You have to own the property for me to be able to issue your license, and then you have to have your license for you as the new owner or as the owner to be able to advertise or operate the rental. So that's really, really important. Every single short-term rental, regardless of a regular, hosted, or temporary, must have a short-term rental licenses. The other question that I get a lot, and that I see used in realtor advertisements a lot, is that the houses have STR licenses that will transfer with the sale. This is not true. STR licenses do not transfer. The STR use of a property may transfer. And that's a really important distinction, because we've had a lot of people who have started advertising or who started renting because they said, well, my property had an STR license and it wasn't due for renewal until September and I bought it in March. Doesn't matter. New owners have to get their own STR license. So the STR use always transfers in the green zone. Again, that zone is unlimited. Everybody can get a license, very easy. The yellow and red zones are a little trickier, and we'll get into these in a little bit as far as what legal nonconforming use does and properties with previous VHRs. But there are ways to purchase properties in the yellow and red zones where the STR use will transfer. But again, upon sale, every new buyer must apply for their own license. And I always tell people to do that on the day of close or as soon thereafter as possible. That's another big one. We understand there's going to be a gap time for how long it takes to submit a license, for the sale to be recorded, and sometimes for me to process the license. Because in the middle of renewal seasons, renewal takes precedent. I try to get to all new license applications every Monday. Sometimes that doesn't happen. But as long as we see that something has been submitted for the new owner, we're not going to penalize that new owner for carrying any rentals that were on the books forward, or for continuing the business of an STR rental. They have shown that they are operating, in good faith and according to, the ordinance, and it just takes time sometimes. So then the other big thing is that licenses must be renewed each year. I think you guys understand that. I think most of the property managers understand that. That really comes to individuals that are managing their own homes. They get a license. Oh, wait, I have to do this every year? Yes. Licenses must be renewed every year. It's a really simple process, but it's something that in the first year, I think we had about 300 people that failed to renew their licenses. The second year, I think it was only about 138. We're now rolling into our third year of renewals. And so far, it's been very good. People are doing a great job and getting everything turned in on time. Some of this has to do with some of the new rules we've just adopted. So since day one, the renewal period has opened 60 days in advance of the expiration date of the license, and the city program auto-generates a renewal email. Then the window opens, you can go in, you can pay your fees, you can upload your documents, and every single day I'm in there looking at licenses that are due to expire within that 60-day window. Because there were some questions about people not getting those renewals, sometimes when the city auto-generates emails, it will come with a do not reply, and that tends to be a little confusing. But again, renewals are sent at 60 days out. Now they are also sent at 30 days and 15 days prior to expiration. And then if the license expires that next day, or if it's on a weekend, 2 days later, then I manually generate an expiration notice that will go out to the owner. And this is just to give everyone as much heads up as we can. We don't want licenses to expire. We don't want people to get in trouble. Again, as Kristi and I said, our goal is to have this program working and to have people be happy and not have to go to court and to not get in trouble. Excuse me, 60, 30, 15 days prior to expiration. If for some reason someone has missed all of that and still fails to renew, the license closes and it does expire. So I can't accept expired licenses. I can't go in and renew something once it's expired. But what you can do is apply for a new license right away. I know there's this idea out there that the day the license expires, we start, looking into it and going after, and our code compliance officer really wanted to prosecute people. That's not the case. Even after the first year of the 300 or some odd licenses that had expired, I reissued well over half of those licenses again, because people have time. We'll get people that call, hey, my license expired, it was only a week. What do I do? Can I renew it? No, I'm sorry, you can't renew it, but you can apply again right away. It's like 2 extra pieces of paper, and it's frustrating. But again, we don't want to keep you from getting your license. The biggest thing, though, that you have to be aware of, or the owners have to be aware of, is that once your license expires, It is unlawful to advertise, offer, or operate the STR rental without the license. So if it's expired, by law, you need to either take down any marketing you have for that unit, you have to cancel any reservations that are in that unit, and if you don't take down the advertising, you need to shift it to a 30-day or more. So then it shifts into the long-term rental. And this is where it gets very confusing, and it feels very punitive if you've missed your renewal window and all of a sudden your license expires, particularly right now. We had a couple cases where that happened right before the new year. And I got calls about, Paula, my license expired. Do I really have to tell these people they can't come? Well, yes, by law you do. That's just the way the code is written. So that's where we really want to give people as much time as possible. Again, 60 days, 30, then 15, all kinds of notices to get the renewal done. And honestly, it doesn't even have to be complete. As long as you pay your renewal fee or you just go in and upload one of the documents, the renewal will be good. And I will let you know if I'm missing anything. You will get a very detailed email that says, hey, you paid your fees, but I'm still missing your renewal document and your self-inspection. Or, oh, you uploaded your self-inspection, but maybe the fee didn't process. You still have to do that. And I send a lot of notices that way because, again, our goal is really to keep people in compliance. So the two, well, there's actually a third, so we'll get into that. But the two ways that you can get a property in the yellow and the red zone. The yellow zone, again, that's restricted. So many STR licensors are allowed in each of the 6 subzones. But what City Council did in an effort to preserve the rights of owners that had already held vacation rental home permits and were already operating their homes as short-term rentals prior to the adoption of the code, were to say, okay, if you had a vacation home rental permit, these were the types of permits you needed for a single-family home or a duplex prior to the adoption. If you had one of those, we're going to grandfather you in, no matter where you're located in Steamboat. As long as you had that, we're going to let you apply for a new short-term rental license, and you'll be able to continue to operate your home as a short-term rental. There were a couple people that didn't do that. That's what you guys read about in the paper. That's what City Council dealt with several months ago. And so the city then adopted an amendment to the code that provided a VHR amnesty period for 2 months from September 26th to November 24th, where all those people who had VHRs but didn't apply, or they might have had a VHR that expired, they also gave them the opportunity to come back and get their licenses. I think there were about 10, really, not many. Most of the people had done that. The other way to get a license in the yellow or the red zone was if you had been renting your condo or your townhome, and you were able to prove that you had been doing so for 12 consecutive months prior to the adoption of the code. So then you were able to get what was called legal nonconforming use registration. And that kind of lives to the side of the STR process. The legal nonconforming use registration is used for a number of things within the community development code. But that's where the city thought that this would live and be good. So what the legal nonconforming use registration did was then allow you, once you had it, to apply for an STR license. So you have to have both in order to be renting in the yellow and the red zone if you had a condo. The owners provided history of rentals prior to 6/15/2022. They got the legal nonconforming, they got their STR, and then one of the caveats of the legal nonconforming use permit is that you cannot abandon the STR use of the property for a period of 12 months or more. 12 consecutive months, sorry. This gets very confusing for a lot of people because everyone wants to tie it to, well, my legal nonconforming use was approved on this date, so that's when it started. That's not true. Or my STR was approved on this date, and that's when that started. Again, that's not true. Legal nonconforming use resets with the departure of every guest. So it's a rolling 12-month period. So you can have somebody that departed on April 23rd, 2024, and your condo can sit empty. Your STR can be renewed on June 23rd, 2024. But I still have to see a history of 12 months of rentals that goes through every 12-month consecutive period, or I can't approve your license. So if your license approved, in the example I just used, you had a rental that departed on April 23rd, 2024. Your license got renewed in June of 24. That's great because you had a rental up until April that same year. If you go into 2025 and you don't have another rental though, and you get up to your renewal date and maybe you put a rental in right before June, you're still going to have a gap of greater than 12 months because I'm using April 23rd, 2024 as that last date. So if you waited till May or June the next year, you will have missed that window. So that's the biggest thing, and that's where the renewals of STRs with legal nonconforming use and the sales of properties with legal nonconforming use get a little tricky. You always want to make sure that the buyer can provide you with ongoing rental use with that information, or you as the buyer's agent. And I'm happy to go into every license and tell you, like, here's when I see the very last date. So here's what you're going to need to ask as a buyer. Here's what you need to provide as a buyer's agent. Here's what you're going to need to ask for as an owner's agent. I get asked a lot if I will guarantee that an STR license will be given to the new owner. No, I can't ever guarantee that because crazy things happen. And we've seen that in the last 6 months. So I can't guarantee it. What I can do is just tell you what I see in the screen, in all of my information, all the information that the buyer has or with their current property with the STR, and then what the seller has, and then what the buyer will need. Anyway, I can get into a lot of this too. I'm sure there's a lot of questions on legal nonconforming, but those are the basics for there. Now the third exception to getting an STR in the yellow zone is through the lottery process. In order to run a lottery, there has to be a license available in that subzone. Right now, every subzone has every single STR allotted. But when we first adopted the STR code, we had 2 zones that didn't have all of the STRs allotted. So that was subzone B1, Sunlight, and subzone B2, the clubhouse area. So we have run 2 lotteries since we started the STR program. I believe we allotted 3 permits for subzone B1. So they have, they have a cap of 5. And then one of the VHR owners was able to get a license back during the amnesty period. So that subzone, 2 people got permits. And then 1 other person got theirs back. So now subzone B1 has 6 licenses that are allotted. They no longer have a waiting list either. So that's the other thing. Sorry, I kind of missed that. When you get issued a license via the lottery, we let the winners know they've gotten it. Then we create a waiting list for the lottery. We only maintain that waiting list for 1 year. And the reason is because we know properties are going to turn over. So there's really no need to maintain this constant waiting list that could be in place for 1 year. It could be in place for 10 years. If it's in place for 1 year and for some reason someone loses their STR license in that subzone, then we would go to the waiting list. But after 1 year, we felt like that was long enough. With the turnover of houses, it really makes more sense to run a lottery again. So right now, there's no more waiting list. Same thing with subzone B2. We ran a lottery. I think there were 5 licenses available for that subzone. All of them were allotted. We kept the waiting list for a year, and now it has disappeared because it's been about, I think, 18 months since we ran that lottery. Now, the unique thing about the lottery STRs is that these are not like the VHRs. They are also not like the legal nonconforming use permits. They do not run with the land. So, is that mine? Sorry, my computer does strange things sometimes. Anyway, STR lottery winners, their licenses don't run with the land. So anybody that has gotten an STR license via the lottery, that's theirs and theirs alone. If they sell the property, it goes away and we will run another lottery. The other thing that we just changed in the code too is that STR lottery winners also now have to prove that they are using the STR license. So it's a use it or lose it type permit, very similar to the legal non-conforming use. Although their use is tied annually to when their permit was adopted, because that is how they got their license. So, all right. For those of you who've never seen it, this is what a short-term rental license looks like. And I know Kristi wanted to run over a bunch of the things. Well, sorry. So this is what I issue once you get it, and it tells what kind of license you have. If it's a short-term rental, a hosted, or a temporary, it will have the owner's name, their address, talk about maximum occupancy, the vehicles, give you the license number and your licensee number. And I know you wanted to talk about this if you want to jump in.
Yeah, so the license number will change every single year that you apply for renewal. So that is important, and I will get into that in a few minutes. It also reminds people you have to post this inside your unit in a conspicuous, visible place so that people who are guests who are staying there actually know, oh, this is a properly licensed unit. And then most importantly, it has the expiration date right on here. So it's a good thing. People should have calendar reminders as far as their renewals and not just rely on these automatic notices and reminders that are sent out by the city. But people should be on top of that renewal deadline because, as Paula has mentioned, if you fail to renew before it expires, you have to apply for a brand new license. So,
yeah. One of the things I will say is, so we're issued to, as an example, we use John Doe LLC. I get a lot of questions from people that own their property in their own names or the names of their personal trust. They don't want to put this license up because their names are on it. They don't like the idea, of privacy and their names being on it. This is a business license. This information gets pulled directly from the assessor's office. But what I do tell everyone is that if you don't want your name on your license, you may create an LLC. You may put your property, you may quitclaim it into a business or something else that doesn't have your name specifically on it. That is one of the instances where we can not transfer your license, but reissue it, because licenses are always issued to the property owner. So.
okay, so talking about transferring a license, the general rule is it is prohibited. There are some exceptions that I will get into, but generally you cannot transfer a short-term rental license from one person to another, and you cannot transfer a license from one property to another property. So for example, you have an owner who's selling their condo, they want to buy a new condo or a new property, both are short-term rental eligible, they have a short-term rental license on the old property that they are selling, they cannot transfer that license to the new property that they are buying. So as soon as they sell that property, that license essentially becomes null and void, and whoever purchases that property, as Paula has mentioned, would have to apply for their own short-term rental license. All right. So, as I mentioned, there are some exceptions. By and large, as brokers or realtors, you will likely not be involved in any of these situations where a short-term rental license could transfer. So oftentimes these are including kind of operations of law. So whether it's the owners establishing a trust and transferring ownership of the property into a trust where the owner is also a named beneficiary. So, for example, someone could not create a trust and only have their grandchildren listed as beneficiaries. That license would not transfer because you're essentially transferring ownership to different people. As Paula mentioned, you can create a corporation, partnership, LLC, or other type of business entity and quitclaim that deed into the name of that business entity, so long as the owner or owners have a controlling interest. So a couple owns a property and they want to create that LLC, they can do that so long as they have the controlling interest in that LLC. There is an additional form that they do have to file with Paula when there is a business entity involved, identifying the owners and the percentage of ownership within that business entity. Between the same parties, either creating or terminating joint tenancy with the crowd in the room. I don't think I need to explain what that means, but from example, tenants in common to tenants, joint tenancy or vice versa. Due to death, so this is either pursuant to a will, so this is actually changing ownership. However, this has been specifically allowed under the municipal code. So either pursuant to will or by intestate succession, which is when somebody passes away without a will, the law kind of outlines who inherits from you. By court order, so whether that's bankruptcy, vesting title, quieting title, to confirm, correct, or modify previous recording, or to grant rights of way, easements, or licenses, and then between spouses or former spouses pursuant to divorce, essentially. So now we're going to switch into how can you get in trouble with short-term rentals in the city of Steamboat Springs. So we're first going to talk about illegal short-term rentals. So what is that? It's operating without a current and valid license. So there are several scenarios in which someone can find themselves kind of afoul of the law or the requirement of a license. So one, you may have never obtained a short-term rental license. This could mean that maybe you're not eligible at all for a short-term rental license, but you went ahead and operated or advertised on a short-term rental basis anyhow. Or you were eligible. For example, maybe your property is located in the unrestricted green area on the map, but you just never applied and obtained a short-term rental license. Next way you can get in trouble is you had a short-term rental license, but it expired. And as Paula mentioned, what the law requires is that you cease all advertisement and operation of that short-term rental license as of your expiration date. If you continue to do so, you can be subject to potential enforcement and consequences under our code. And then the prior owner had a short-term rental license, but the new owner either is not eligible for the license, so maybe that prior owner lost their legal non-conforming use registration status, or various, like the lottery system, where that license does not allow the new owner to be eligible for a short-term rental license, or the new owner is eligible but then again never applied for their own license. So with regard to enforcement, the penalty, I guess it would be a summons for municipal court. So there are two different venues where you could be appearing when you get in trouble with short-term rentals. When it's for operating without a license, you're always going to be summoned into municipal court if it gets to that point and the city pursues that avenue. There are two possible violations that end up occurring here. So one is 12-571A. So all of this is in our code, and I've provided certain citations if anyone is interested in going and reading through our code. If you're wanting to operate or advise people with regard to short-term rentals, it is very important to understand and know what the code says. So 12-571A basically says you cannot advertise, offer, provide, or operate a short-term rental without first obtaining a license. And then the second one is 12-543D. So basically that one requires that you have to list the current license number in every single advertisement. And if you don't, then you can be subject to penalties in municipal court. This one also specifically applies to both the owner and agent of the owner, or to any person providing advertising services for the owner. So City Council specifically, when they adopted this code, kind of carved that out because we need to make sure that these properties are currently licensed. So as I mentioned when we showed the example of the short-term rental license, that license number changes every single year, so that license number needs to be updated in every advertisement every year that it is renewed. So possible penalties in municipal court for operating without a license under 12-571A, it is a penalty of up to a $2,650 fine. That is a per day possible violation. And then there is a mandatory 2-year ban. So this 2-year ban applies not only to every owner of the property, but it also applies to the address itself. So it runs with the land. And then violation of 12-543D, failure to provide that current license number in each advertisement, is also punishable by up to the maximum fine of $2,650 per day. So now we're going to move into operational requirements. So these are where you have a current and valid short-term rental license. What are the rules regarding how you properly operate this short-term rental? So there are some requirements in the code. All of these are contained under 12-542. You need to display the license in a visible location inside the property, as we've already talked about. You need to comply with the maximum occupancy. So the maximum occupancy is going to vary with every single unit because the maximum occupancy is based on the square footage of the unit, so the size of the unit. Based on the example that Paula presented, I think it was a maximum of 6 people could be in that particular unit. So if you exceed that maximum occupancy, that will be a violation of the operational requirements. Under the code, even if your property is larger, so the code allows 1 person per 150 square feet, with a bare minimum of 2, everyone will be allowed a minimum of 2 people for occupancy, but the maximum you will be allowed, even if your property is large enough to accommodate more people, the maximum you will be allowed is 16 people as the maximum occupancy. We also frequently get a question, babies do count as a person. So yes, they do count against that maximum occupancy. Yeah. The maximum occupancy for outdoor activities is actually double the number of permitted occupancy. So with Paula's example, the 6 maximum occupancy, you could actually have a total of 12 people for any kind of outdoor activity. You do need to provide a minimum number of parking spaces. And again, as we pointed out, the license allows a certain number of parking spaces that is based on the property itself. And then these parking spaces can be located outside of the garage so long as there are certain requirements met. For example, they have to be on a drivable surface, an all-weather surface, and they cannot be located within a city right-of-way or emergency access right-of-way. So these are specific to each license, and the maximum the code allows is a maximum of 6 vehicles or parking spaces per rental unit.
I would say most of the parking stuff is driven by HOAs. When it comes to single-family homes, when people are submitting their parking and snow storage removal policy and tell me how many spaces they have, we ask for photos so I can see how many spaces they really have in the garage and then how many spaces really are in the driveway. So there's not a lot of ambiguity in that. I've really only run into one applicant that wanted to have 10 parking spaces for a duplex just randomly outside in an unpaved area. And we had to have a lot of discussions about how that worked because I wouldn't allow that. And the code doesn't actually either, so.
One of the most important operational requirements is having a designated local responsible party. The licensee is required to notify the city of any changes, whether that's contact information for that person or whether they change who their 24/7 contact is going to be. So the local responsible party is important because the city operates a 24/7 hotline for any complaints regarding short-term rentals in Steamboat. So if the property is identified as one having a valid license, then the hotline will be contacting that 24/7 local responsible party. So you can't have someone who is an absentee owner lists themselves as the responsible party because they're not local. They have to be in the Steamboat Springs area, and they are required, when they're notified by the hotline, they're required to respond to any complaint within 1 hour. So that's part of the balancing, hey, I live next to a short-term rental that's a party home all the time, and the property owner's abilities to utilize their units as a short-term rental. So there is a specific notice that is required to be posted within the unit. It is a little redundant for a few things, but there are some other information that is required to be posted in the unit as well. So for example, the name and 24-hour contact for that local responsible party needs to be clearly displayed in the unit. The maximum occupants allowed, including the outdoor guest maximum number, the maximum vehicles allowed, and the locations of those parking spaces. So that's really important, especially when it comes to our overnight parking restrictions during the winter months, so that we can allow for snowplow operations with the city. So it's important that guests know where they're allowed to park so they don't get issued parking tickets. And then there is a notice that's required. We do have, for D, we do have a form that will be posted online in the next few weeks that will cover all of these basic things that you can fill out, but it's rules regarding overnight parking, trash removal, the prohibition on camping or outdoor sleeping. So you cannot allow someone to pitch a tent in the backyard as part of your short-term rental. You also cannot allow them to occupy a camper or any kind of recreational vehicle. That is specifically not allowed under the code. Rules regarding noise and other matters established by the municipal code. So enforcement can happen by receiving a notice of hearing to appear in front of the short-term rental hearings officer, or by a summons into the municipal court. With regard to violations that could be cited and heard by the short-term rental hearings officer, so they're essentially a judge or a magistrate, if you will, that only hears short-term rental issues, and only if you have a valid license would you ever be cited potentially in front of the short-term rental hearings officer. So it could be any violation of the operational requirements. You could be advertising or renting that to more people than what your maximum occupancy is allowed. Any violation of Article 9, Chapter 12, so that is the short-term rental section of the municipal code. Any violation of the terms, conditions, or provisions of the license, and any violation of the revised municipal code whatsoever. So this could be your guests are creating too much noise, and there have been complaints called in to either the hotline or the police department. It could be trash, where your guests or your cleaning company could be not properly disposing of trash. Maybe they're putting attractive food waste into the recycling container. So we all know how much we care about bears in our community and why we have those regulations regarding trash and how we properly dispose of that type of trash. So, and then we've even had an issue with peeping, which is illegal under our code, where we had guests using a flashlight and looking into a bedroom of a neighboring unit. Pretty disturbing. So the licensee can get in trouble for any of these violations. And then the last one is any false statement made in any license or renewal application. And unfortunately, not everyone is as honest and truthful as we would all like to believe, and we have unfortunately caught a few people running afoul of that violation. So anyone can cause potentially a violation. It could be the licensee themselves, meaning the owners of the property, any agent, servant, or employee of the licensee, so it could be a management company, the cleaning company, or any occupant or guest. The unlawful acts are specifically stated in the code under 12-543, and the first 4 of these bullet points could either be summoned into municipal court or heard in front of the short-term rental hearings officer. So Operating without functioning smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, or fire extinguishers as identified in the self-inspection checklist. This checklist is required to be completed every single year that you renew your license. Allowing camping, outdoor sleeping, or occupancy of any camper or recreational vehicle on the property during a short-term rental. So we've actually had instances where the property owner was staying in the camper while they were renting out the property as a short-term rental. So that's not allowed under the code. Operating a short-term rental that does not comply with all applicable city and state laws. Advertising short-term rental without the current license number. As well as advertising any unlicensed short-term rental. So that last bullet point is really, that will never go in front of the short-term rental hearings officer. That will only go in front of the municipal court, as I previously mentioned. So possible consequences for municipal court for any of the operational requirements that we've discussed are considered a general offense under our municipal code. It's the same as whether you were charged with theft or vicious animal, and that is up to a $2,650 fine per day. And then possible consequences in front of the short-term rental hearings officer. These are considered civil penalties, and it is up to the same monetary amount per violation per day. They also can face possible suspension of up to 6 months of their short-term rental license, as well as revocation of their license, so completely revoking their license altogether. If we could go back.
Yeah.
One more?
Oh my goodness.
If the hearings officer recommends revocation of the license, City Council ultimately has the final determination on what happens to that license. So it would be scheduled in front of City Council, and City Council would then determine whether the license would actually be revoked or whether they would impose a lesser period of suspension for that licensee. So there are some guidelines for the short-term rental hearings officer. So even for a first offense within 2 years, it could be as minimal as a warning, it could be civil penalties, or it could be up to a 60-day suspension for a first offense. Second offense, you can see that it's recommending suspension between 30 and 90 days. Third offense in 2 years, 60 to 180-day suspension. Where the code recommends revocation for guidance for the hearings officer is your third offense in 1 year. So this is maybe a problem property that's constantly, maybe a party house, too many cars, too many people, too much noise. Operating during a suspension, big no-no. And then false statements in a license or renewal application. And finally, any violation that would be a basis to deny a license in the first place. All right.
So that kind of wraps up everything about STRs. We have tried to build all of this information into our website. We want it to be as user-friendly as possible. So right now, if you log on to our general STR website, this is what you would see. So under our licensing, you'll find our STR license application guide, the STR license renewal guide, all of the application and renewal documents, and some general information. The guides are click-by-click examples of what you have to do when you get into the City View portal. If you follow it and you do everything it says, you can't go wrong with those guides. And again, all of the documents that you need to submit with your initial license, with a renewal, and then several other additional documents, a change of local responsible party, a license transfer request form, even the exemption forms for the 3 properties that we have are all found on that page. Rules and regulations dives more into what Kristi was explaining, all the legalities. It'll give you the overlay zone link. You can click on the interactive map so you can get in and you can look up a property and see exactly what zone it's in. You have the link to all of the codes. Frequently asked questions, really, we're redoing that. We're actually in the midst of redoing quite a few of the links. Because I don't know if you guys know, but this year Colorado had a new accessibility law that came into play, and so every public-facing document that we have has to be accessible. So some of the items we've pulled off of the website, they will also get added back in. But these three things, the data and reports is really where a lot of information that you guys as realtors or property managers would need. That's where we have the summary report, so all the licenses we've issued. We've issued around 2,500 licenses throughout Steamboat. I don't really know the breakdown between the green, yellow, and red zones. I think it's somewhere, there are about 375 in the red, 100-something in the yellow, and the vast majority are all in the green zone. And then every couple weeks, I try and do it quarterly, we upload a list of active STR licenses. So that is a very long PDF, but it goes by street name and number, and you can look up every property that has been issued an STR license in there. If you get in there and you don't see it, you can always call or shoot me an email and I can get in our system and check for you. But really what we tried to do was put everything that you could need onto the website so you can get online, you can do your due diligence, you can refer clients to the STR licensing guides so they would know how to apply. And then if there's anything missing, that's when you can give me a call and go through all of this. Again, if you get on right now, you'll see there are a lot of places that we still have placeholders for. The enforcement and complaints. We've just now gotten to a point rolling into our third year of licensing where we can really correlate all the data and pull a lot of information that's going to be helpful to the public. And I know one of my colleagues and she's been pulling that data. We're working on a big summary. So within the next month or two, I would tell you also you're going to see a lot of improvements to this website as well. I wanted to get questions and feedback too, so if there's anything specific, you guys tell us that you have looked on the website and you really think it would be helpful to have there, I can hear that, and we can sit down with our marketing team and do it all at once instead of piecemeal. So, the biggest thing though, getting all this information, become familiar with the website, as I said, know the codes. Those are on the website, but we've also given you this little sheet. You can take a picture of it, but it's got the 2 QR codes that will take you directly to the different links for the website and for the STR codes. Always go in and check the interactive map on the Rules and Regs site. That will tell you where the properties are. You can see what zone they're in. Get all the application materials from the seller. If you're the seller's agent, help prepare all that kind of stuff. And then again, call me with any questions. So I think we're on to questions.
Can you read the phone number back up there?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Wasn't fast enough.
Oh, no problem. Sorry, I was very fast. Yes.
So on the last page, the website, is there a place on there on that active STR list or anywhere else where we can see if a specific STR has violations or is under like a 6-month or 2-month ban? How do we find information out about that?
That you have to call for.
Okay.
We don't have that listed. I hadn't even thought of that. Really, we don't have any more properties. No, there's one property that still has a 2-year ban. But yeah, and I don't know. You'd have to answer questions about the legality of putting that up there.
Yeah,
other
I
than
don't know
calling
that
me.
we would be allowed to list that type of information. One, we don't want to encourage retaliation if, maybe there are neighbors who just hate the fact that there's a short-term rental next to them and they want to really try and get their license revoked. I mean, we don't want to encourage any kind of behavior like that.
Yeah. Sorry, we'll go here then here.
You can have an illegal short-term rental and you can end up with a 2-year ban,
Yes,
and that stays with the property, it doesn't end with the sale?
that is correct.
Why is that?
That is the code. That is what.
Why is that? I mean, because it seems like it's an infraction on the owner. Why would it stay with the property?
Well, I don't know that I can answer that question. City Council did adopt that, and that is the interpretation from the city attorney, that the ban does run with the land.
And so that could be in the green zone, any zone.
Potentially. Yeah, it's not limited by where the property is located.
But there's no public way to research if a property you're looking at has a 2-year ban.
You would be able to call
You
and
can call me and I can
ask
tell you
Paula.
if there's a ban on the property.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
But just
What I'm
verbally.
saying is I don't know that, and again, it's up to
Right.
the attorneys, what we can put online or not about that. And to Kristi's point, I mean, I know City Council discussed adoption of the STR code, what it was going to look like, all these variables for years, and then very specifically months before it was adopted. I don't recall what the conversation was about having that piece run with the land, but as she said, that is what's in code right now. So, sorry, go ahead.
I think, Kristi, you mentioned something about a 24/7 number here in Steamboat, that a person who had a complaint could call and then that city person, or whoever it was, would then call the contact number of the local responsible person?
Yes, so, and I'm sorry, we've forgotten to repeat the question.
Oh, yeah.
So there was a question, there is about whether there's a 24/7 phone number that can be called for complaint purposes. And yes, the city does have a hotline. It is not manned 24/7 by a city employee, but it is contracted out so that there is someone who is available to accept calls and complaints. I don't have that phone
don't
number
either.
off at hand
Sorry.
right now, but
Is it
that.
on the website?
It is on the
Mm-hmm.
website, yes. It's under the compliance section.
Specifically bring this up because I have some clients who bought a property. It's a duplex and next door is a rental. And they're constantly parking in the shared driveway area. They
Yep.
constantly are making noise after hours. And my clients, who are the owners of the other property, call the owner of the rental property. They've called the hotline number. They've called the police, which I told them isn't relevant. But every time they've just been told there's nothing we can do about it. I don't think the hotline has ever forwarded that complaint anywhere.
So the
They've
hotline
taken
can,
pictures, they've tried to.
yeah, the question relates to a neighboring unit that is being operated as a short-term rental. We don't know if it actually has a license.
It does, we've seen the
It
license.
does
Okay.
have a license, okay. So, and there's concerns about how the hotline is operating. Well, thank you, that's very helpful feedback that we can take back to the hotline. I don't know, perhaps you can provide us that specific information
They might have.
after the presentation, and we might be able to look into it.
The documentation helps, and the short-term rental compliance officer's email is also on that website. And so your clients can always email her with a question, with information, and provide her all that information there too. You know, again, with the more documentation and issues like that you have, the better. Because unfortunately, that is where it breaks down. But yeah, that's, again, all that's on there. And if they're having trouble with the hotline, I would suggest, yeah, reach out to the compliance officer directly.
And who is the compliance officer?
Her name is Stacy Hines. So, yeah.
I have two questions. On the, I just want to clarify the camper comment on the code. So I'm thinking of people that like travel and then stop and take a break at a VRBO. So is it just that it can't be occupied or it can't even be there?
It just cannot be occupied while the unit is being short-term rented. And let me repeat the question. The question was, those people who kind of travel around in campers or vans, that, you know, they are still allowed to be at the VRBO or short-term rental unit so long as they're not occupying their van or RV at the same time.
And then, just curious, because I was not here when this in 2022. So, I know you said you can't guarantee. Why is the process for the new application for a buyer, why is that after?
Because they have to own the property.
So if
We can't issue a license to somebody that doesn't own something.
the people who want this want it because they want to rent it. If you have someone who's buying because they want it as a short-term rental, and they buy it, and then you deny it, it's really hard as a realtor to try to help someone.
Could there be a pending approval process where they know that they've met all
Or
the
what was
characteristics and you haven't offered something yet, but at least they know that they've done?
Yeah, I mean, the way it works is really the issue is going to be more with a legal non-conforming property to make sure that the due diligence is there and there aren't any gaps in the rentals. So as long as the seller has not misrepresented anything, as long as the seller is able to provide all the information proving that there have been no 12-month gaps in the STR, so the STR use can transfer, there really would not be a reason to deny it. But again, strange things happen, and I can't guarantee an absolute transfer. I can say I don't see anything that would prevent me from approving a new license. But the other issue is, yes, people want to submit a license as soon as they put down money. And I am processing some months as many as 600 renewals a month. And then there are more licenses coming in every day, and it's an ongoing list. So if someone submits something 1 month, 3 months, 3 weeks in advance, that's going to get lost. Versus you apply on the day of close, I can see that you've bought the property, Routt County's recorded it, all the information is there. Then it's at the top of the queue. It's very hard to track things going back that far.
We say the day of close, because a lot of things close in the afternoon to actually get an application in. And then if you have a property that the reservation's running between the two owners, a week-long reservation, it closes on Wednesday, they're prorating rents, but the buyer doesn't have a license technically. And they've not necessarily, they can't apply until they own it, but yet they're receiving rent, so technically they'd be in violation. I just wouldn't want to advise a buyer and then they get in trouble about it.
Well, so I would say if they're in the green zone, so we understand that you're buying a business. And again, there is a natural gap, it usually is about a week, from the time the sale is complete to when all the title work gets done and Routt County can record it. So that's one factor. And even if someone applies on the day of close, I probably can't approve their license for a week because I can't see the guarantee that they're the new owner. So unless they submit some kind of closing documents. But we do allow for that gap time. Again, as long as the buyer has applied and thank you, sorry, wrong word. Yes, as long as the buyer has applied for the new license, and they've uploaded all the documents, then we don't tell them that reservations have to be canceled. We don't say that, oh no, you have to turn people away. We understand the STR is a business. And so we have, yes, again, allowed for the old license to cover the new issued license during that gap time, which could be from 1 to 3 weeks.
What if it's
So-
mid-stay?
Sorry, what?
What if it's mid-stay?
That's fine.
Like,
That works.
And they're in a green zone.
Yep. And we've had that happen, and that's where the buyers and sellers have just figured out how to divvy up, the revenue from that.
So it
So-
will go back to good faith. In other words, you close on Friday in the afternoon.
Yeah.
They're not getting the application to you that day. They're going to do it on Monday, but yet rentals could be, so.
Yeah, but you can't wait like 3 months.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
When we
Okay.
first started the process, we had people saying, the example I used, oh, well, they had a license and yeah, the old one covers me, I'm good. And they would wait 6 months or, a very long period. Again, it's a good faith effort on the purchaser to get it done. And it's an understanding of, yes, STRs are a business. We're issuing a business license, but because of just the natural timeframes of things and things that are out of our control, we've tried to internally allow for, those situations
And
in that gap.
I would mention that the application process is all online through the portal. So there's no reason why they can't submit documents Friday afternoon, Saturday, or Sunday, even when city offices are closed. So
It
they can submit,
timestamps
they can,
everything.
Clients, they're out
Yeah.
of the country, they're closing remotely, there's all kinds of strange scenarios that would prevent them doing it within 72
Yeah.
hours type things, but,
the recommendation is that they apply on the day of close.
okay. As long as it's kind of that.
And they can have all that documentation prepared in advance as they're looking toward their closing date.
Okay.
So,
Paula,
I'm so-
did you ever do like a pending approval that is set out to a date that closes?
no.
Why?
It's, yeah, they don't own the property, and it's impossible to do in our system. I can't post-date an approval. So I
It's a pending
what,
approval so that the new owner knows, as long as you meet all the qualifications at closing.
Nope.
The license transfer. Or you get your license issued, actually.
no,
Has it ever happened that someone intended to buy,
Sorry.
knowing that there was going to be short-term license issued to them, and then it hadn't finished, like it didn't get issued to them, and they bought a property thinking one thing, and ended up owning something they couldn't short-term rent?
no.
Has that ever happened?
And purchase has never gone through with that regard. I'm sorry, I don't know who was next. Lynn had her hand up. Did you ask? Okay, and then here, and then we'll come back over here. And I'm sorry, I also want to be respectful of your time. Kristi and I are happy to stay and continue to answer questions, but I do know that we said 1 to 2. But again, please don't feel like you have to run out, so we're happy.
Legal non-conforming status, in order to keep that status, is it one rental night in 12 months?
That's correct. Yep, just has to be one night.
And then it's
Hard to
also,
miss
the
that.
time period starts at checkout.
Yes,
Because the one thing I wonder about, because if you're in a yellow and a red zone, if it expires, what happens? But, so a lot of times they put properties on the market and keep them vacant. They're easier to sell that way. So that's running the clock down.
It
So
is.
If a buyer gets it, they need to find out exactly how much time they have to get it done. And in that case, what happens if it expires? You know, somebody misses renewing it, or in this case, it transfers and they don't renew it in time. If it's yellow and red zone, if it expires, they can't get a license in?
that's correct.
So even if it's on the market, you need to do a one-night rental?
Yes.
Does it have to be arm's length, or does there just have to, I mean,
You-
do they have to actually, they have to pay, but can it be your sister?
It has to be
Or your
a,
friend,
a-
and then
yeah.
you're secretly giving them the money to pay you?
you-
That's what I would do.
See, that would violate the
Yeah.
code because you're lying about,
No, I'm telling you, right up front.
Invite your best friend from Louis.
no, it needs to be a valid rental. And yes, I would say, people have,
Family.
you
people
need to
have
collect
been-
and remit
yeah.
taxes on that as
Yeah.
well. So that's
Yeah.
the other thing you have to prove.
Right.
So it's a valid rental where you've collected and remitted taxes, and you can prove that.
and people have tried to play with the system and they've been caught and have lost their license as a result.
Yeah.
So,
So, Alex, you had a question? Or-
Yeah, so I know you can't guarantee a buyer who's intending to buy a short-term rental in a red zone.
Yeah.
But we ask the seller to provide your past 12 months or past 2 years of rentals, show that you pay the city sales tax, and we have those documents. How do we verify that that's, actually good proof that
Right.
when we close, we then take that information to you, and then the city says, well, that's great, they gave you this, they did this, but this actually wasn't, like, this piece wasn't right. And then now the buyers bought the property, but the documentation, and it doesn't line up. And then, so now, like, is there, I mean, you said it
Yeah.
hasn't happened yet, but what does that situation look like? Because that's where we as brokers are protecting our clients, but there's no guarantee ahead of once the property until the property closes. So I guess that's where we're kind of.
I'm hearing a need for it. I feel like we have a need for it.
But
Like
it's
a need
legal
for this
non-conforming
guarantee.
status that you would
Like,
get
who do we
your
ask to implement this guarantee?
Well,
Like, who do we talk to about talking about it?
She's saying that you can verify that.
Yeah, I can look at the documents that the current owner of the STR
You were
has
saying,
provided
but
me.
I can't guarantee
Well,
it.
yeah,
yeah.
because,
No,
What
no
we're
license
saying
can be
is
guaranteed. Yeah.
We would like to talk to the entity that would put in place this guarantee.
city council.
It's needed. Like, who is that? Who do you talk to?
That would
to
be
say-
whoever changes the code.
Yeah, you'd have to change the code.
City council. City council.
But there, yeah, I agree, there's no.
Dave Barnes is sitting in the back of the room.
There's no guarantee for
Putting you on the spot.
Yeah. Sorry.
I already wrote it down. We're gonna be talking about this.
You can confirm a legal non-conforming status is in good standing.
I can,
And then
yes.
you can say these are the documents that would be needed to reapply
And
for a
you can look
license.
at-
Yes.
And you can confirm you have them from the seller. And you know when the expiration.
Oh,
date-
well, I can confirm, yeah, exactly. So if someone calls me to see if a license is in good standing, I look at the license itself. Okay, is it issued? When was it issued? Then I go back and I look at the last renewal documents, set of renewal documents. Because for any legal non-conforming use unit, they have to have given me a booking report showing all completed stays from the last 12-month period I had a record of. So I can go in and say, okay, for this year, let's say there's somebody whose renewal is coming due, January 23rd, tomorrow. The last renewal, the last booking document they submitted showed that they had rentals through January 21st of 2024. So then I would say, okay, you have to submit renewals from January 1st, 2024, or whatever, 2025, sorry, through 2026, through current, present. And even if I've seen that the sale might occur 6 months after the last rental, I still tell agents, or buyers, ask for the most current booking report. Because again, you don't want to start 6 months back if they have record of reservations that lead up to the date of close. Give yourself that full 12, and even if you plan on renting right away, that's fine. But yes, I can look at all of that and give you that information. Yeah.
But you cannot jive with violations. So if there's a problem or if they've had complaints and stuff, that's like a whole different department.
That is different, yeah.
So you just can say, like, green light, your department, but we have no idea if they're in
Well,
trouble.
Sorry, I was gonna say, so I do see a code enforcement, alert that comes up when I look at the property, if there's a ban or something like that. There will be an alert, and that would cause me to then reach out to the STR compliance officer or to figure out what's going on.
But to do a thorough check, you have to check with you and the compliance officer.
So the compliance, I guess that it will only depend if there is a pending municipal court case, and that's something that you should be seeking out as you're investigating whether this is a good property to purchase. Have the owners disclose, are there any pending issues? Have there been any complaints, violations? Have you ever appeared in front of the short-term rental hearings officer or the municipal court? I mean, make sure that you have all of the necessary information. One thing that I wanted to point out is with regard to violations in front of the short-term rental hearings officer, those are only against the licensee, so that's the owner. Those don't transfer or penalize a new owner, even if we have record at that property. So they're not going to be additionally penalized by the short-term rental hearings officer if there's 2 prior violations in the previous 2 years and they get 1. Theirs is going to be treated as a first offense because they're new owners.
But if it's against a property, that first offense and that second offense from the previous owner will stay on that record. So then the new owner only has 1.
No.
Municipal code, no?
No,
It
so
starts
if you're
over.
in front of the hearings officer with a valid license, only licensees can be brought into hearing in front of the hearings officer. So the licensee is the owner. When the owner changes, then the clock essentially starts over with regard to hearings officer violations.
But if it's municipal court,
Municipal court is different, that's the ban that you're referencing.
right?
So, yeah.
Illegal.
For illegal, if you're operating without a valid license at all. And I think Paula said that we only have 1 property currently under a 2-year ban right now.
Yeah, so Todd.
I want to come at this from a slightly different angle. So we understand that we can come to you and find out if that property is in good standing. No guarantee that the new buyer is gonna be able to obtain a short-term rental license, right? You just said
Yeah,
there's no
I can't
guarantee.
give you
Can't
an
guarantee it,
absolute
right.
guarantee.
But
Yeah.
what criteria does that new buyer have that would, or lack of criteria, however you want to look at it, what would prevent that buyer from obtaining a short-term rental license in the green zone where there's no infractions on the property, there's no 2-year ban, da-da-da-da-da? I mean,
There shouldn't be anything.
Well,
it's
there-
not like
There could be,
I mean,
if that property owner is under a ban for a different property. That applies to all properties within the city. So, yeah.
But I'm a buyer,
Yeah.
I'm just coming into Steamboat, I'm buying a property, it's got a short-term rental license. How could I, as a new buyer, not get that license?
Can't foresee a situation. And that's why I say, like, I can't see anything
Yeah,
from the previous owner to the new owner that would prevent me from issuing a license. But at the same time, I'm not at liberty to sign off on, hey, guaranteed.
no, understood.
That's just the semantics and the difference there. And I get it, I understand, you guys are doing transactions, that are binding, and it's important to have a guarantee. But
Oh, is that code or is that part of it, is that a problem with your system? Is that something the city council would dictate to you to do, or is that something you go through with Rebecca?
So,
It's kind of like
Kristi?
a building permit, like a TCO, right? You get a TCO, it doesn't guarantee that you get your CO down the road, but at least you get a TCO so you know that you can do certain things with the property. I'm just curious how that falls on you guys.
I'm gonna let Kristi answer that.
well, I'm not certain. That could come from a modification of the code. Currently, in the code, there's a list of factors that Paula considers when determining whether or not a license should be issued. Some things are whether you've had a prior violation of, under the municipal code regarding short-term rental uses, whether you've had a 2-year ban in the past, prior suspensions or revocations of your license if you're applying for a renewal. So those factors are all listed out there. If you're a new buyer, new to Steamboat, coming in, those types of situations aren't going to apply. I would say those are the primary issues for why a license could be denied. The other thing is to make sure your buyers are being proactive, not only getting their license application in on time, but being responsive. If Paula asks for additional information or, hey, you haven't paid your fee, make sure your buyers are complying within a timely period.
That's the issue that they're talking about, is they can't do the due diligence prior to close, so that it's just a seamless transfer. Just like prorating taxes, just like prorating insurance, everything would line up at the day of closing. I'm just trying to figure out what would be the best avenue for me to try to make that happen for you girls, you ladies, to make that easier. Because it does seem like it's a kind of a gap in a very big purchase of a business that would transfer. I don't want to make it harder. I'd like to see if there's something we could do to make it easier. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure what you're suggesting, though, makes it easier, is what I'm saying, because issuing something pending that I then have to keep separately tracked versus just, hey, there's a new owner.
The issuing anything would just be an approval that they've met all the criteria for this license. Once the property is transferred, that license is approved. It just seems like it's like due diligence of any other part of the whole thing, right? If you don't make the last thing on your mortgage, you go to closing, you don't get to close on the property. I don't know.
That's something we could look into. Our system isn't currently, it's tough to track that way, Dave, and given the numbers, it's just hard to go in. It really is not like a building permit or something where you give it pending and it's kind of going through this process. It's a very day of transaction that occurs. And again, I think we've allowed for, that gap time that it takes, allowed for people being able to call me and meet and having everything on the website to say, here's everything you need to have it ready to go. So,
I wasn't
Yeah.
trying to make it harder, just trying to see if there's a way that.
sure. I mean, and again, it's,
I think there's two potential avenues. One would be a code modification, which would come from city council, or direction from the planning director to modify. So, yeah, those are my two
The
thoughts.
system is a lot more, that makes more sense than us not being
Yeah.
able to, it makes it really hard to track.
sorry, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, I'm just curious on the lottery aspect of getting a license, is that written on the license that it came as a lottery, just in case, let's say, a seller forgot that they got it?
It actually is not, sorry, the question was, is the STR lottery license, is that written separately? And no, that's a very good question. That is something that is tracked internally. So again, anybody that opens up City View, which is what we use to manage everything, can see that. But honestly, that's a really good idea to have that on there, that it's an
That would be easy to
STR
forget
license.
For a few years,
Yeah.
conveniently.
Well, and knowing that those particular licenses do not transfer eligibility to the
Yes.
new owner, and that would be really important. So if you are helping someone and considering purchasing a property in any of the yellow zone areas, I would be calling Paula to verify, is this a standard license, or is this one that was obtained in a lottery? Good question.
Right on the line, right on.
Yeah,
It absolutely could,
no, and
yeah.
that's an easy fix.
Yep.
In
So-
the yellow zone too, in the subzones on the total number of allowable units that are set now, is there talk to increase that?
Not to my knowledge.
Not to my
No.
knowledge.
That's a question for him, but. I have a question about advertising, because I understand if you're advertising, I want to rent this, you got to put your license number.
Yeah.
But if we're advertising somebody who has a permit, and we're marketing it, it has a short-term rental permit, do we need to put their number on there?
Like in your real estate
No.
advertising?
No.
Yeah, no.
No, it's only
I just wanted to be sure I
advertising.
wouldn't trigger a violation by
No.
my
Yeah, no.
advertising. for my-
No, it's
You're
only
not.
advertising for the rental of the unit. Yeah,
Very good.
good question. Anything else? All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for
guys
your
very much,
time.
and
I
thank
hope
you
this
to
was helpful.
Sarah and the Board of Realtors. I didn't
Yes.
get to say that when everyone was still in here, for putting this all together and joining us in our first Civic Connections presentation.